Hi, Not From Boston fans. I know, our off-season has been fairly quiet, but this week, Harry and I had a chance to sit down once again with the Athletics' Jen McCaffrey. Jen, as you might remember, is the Red Sox beat writer, and we had a chance to cover a lot of ground. It was a really fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. As always, please remember to like and subscribe to Not From Boston on wherever you get your podcasts or on Substack. Here's Jen McCaffrey.
Jen, thank you so much for coming back to Not From Boston. How are you doing?
Doing okay. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to cover, but just to kick things off, the Red Sox had a really interesting week. They DFA'd Nathaniel Lowe, and they moved a lot of bullpen arms around, including Bernardino and Guerrero and Chris Murphy. You also wrote a really great piece today about the pitching development pipeline and how the Red Sox have really turned that ship around. Given all of these moves that have happened just this week, do you think the Red Sox are interested in adding to their bullpen via free agency or trade as a result, or are they confident with what they have now?
No, I definitely think they're going to be adding. I know they have like kind of the back end of the bullpen set with Chapman and Whitlock. That said, though, a couple of my colleagues at the Athletic reported, the possibility of sort of a super bullpen and looking into a guy like Devin Williams and adding him to the mix, where they could kind of slide him into the ninth and use Chapman in the eighth, or kind of figure out how he would strengthen the back of the bullpen. But obviously, that's one way of reducing runs scored is having a
Mhm.
really tight back end of the bullpen. But I think regardless, there'll probably be some sort of um, like lefty reliever added. That's always, and especially
Mhm.
given just traded away Bernardino and Murphy, there's kind of a need now with Chapman being really the
Mhm.
only lefty in the pen right now. So I'm fairly certain they'll end up adding um, one of those free agent arms. That seems you can never kind of have enough of those guys. Obviously, injuries crop up, so that seems like a pretty certain thing. I do think though, like the priorities for the offseason are obviously in the rotation to find a starter behind Crochet, and then obviously adding a bat to the rotation or to the lineup. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they add an arm or two to the bullpen.
Cool.
Yeah, I think because the priority, as you mentioned, is most likely a starting pitcher and or hopefully both a middle of the order bat. Is there a possibility that we see someone like a Hunter Dobbins or a Sandoval who will be playing his first innings for the Sox next season move as a full-time bullpen arm?
Potentially, yeah. I think what they would I in an ideal world just kind of keep all those guys stretched out as starters so they have as many starter options as possible heading into the spring. And then guys always say how much easier it is to kind of reduce someone's workload versus like totally ramp them up into a starting role. So I think the goal this offseason is just to go into camp with as many starter options possible and then kind of pull back and kind of put those guys into roles that fit in the bullpen. Um, Once they kind of figure out, what they have and what their needs are. I know like a guy like Richard Fitz obviously started and kind of relieved at points last year. So we'll see where all these guys are too, like health wise. Obviously Dobbins is coming off the ACL, I think it is, but and should be ready. But like you never know, you kind of always have to sort of monitor the thing. We didn't know last year at this time that Cutter Crawford was dealing with the thing that he was dealing with and didn't find that out till spring training. So I think they just want to have as many options as possible. Of those guys, I would assume just given Sandoval's kind of track record as a kind of a more veteran guy, he would have like the leg up, but it all depends on how they perform. If he comes into spring training and can't, get the ball over the middle of the plate, having not pitched in a year, then obviously they'll look elsewhere. But
Sure.
yeah, I think just having as many options as possible is the key.
Cool.
Um, just briefly, I think taking a bigger bird's eye view of baseball as a whole, it's hard not to have conversations about the game without acknowledging the elephant in the room. Uh, what is your sense about what is your gut feeling about the likelihood of a lockout in 2027? I was on had the pleasure of being at a panel discussion last week with Scott Boris and Billy Bean, and I got to ask them about it, and Scott Boras gave me a very Scott Boras answer, but like at the same time, one that I walked away from thinking, oh, that actually is like surprisingly positive, and like this might all be avoided.
Yeah, similar to what was it, 2022, the last kind of work stoppage
Yeah.
period with the CBA. I wouldn't be surprised if it's something like that where maybe it bleeds into spring training, but this is just such a big business for both sides. I think that there's eventually, I don't think it's going to bleed into the regular season.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously this round is much more contentious, but I do think that just both sides will realize how much is at stake here, especially since the game is kind of, you know, peaking or kind of on the rise in
Mhm.
terms of interest and what we've seen with kind of the playoffs this past year and viewership. I don't think they want to risk that, jeopardize that, and kind of piss off fans and just, not have the product on the field. So, as contentious as it is and as ugly as it might get, I can see there being some sort of like stoppage over the winter again, like that off
Mhm.
season. But I can't imagine it's going to bleed into the regular season. So we'll see where it goes, and see if there's any kind of movement made before then, but or progress made before then. Um, but yeah, right now my gut's telling me that like there'll be a regular season. It
Mhm.
might not be pretty getting there, and it might cut into spring training in 2027. But I think there's just too much riding on it for both sides to kind of not figure it out.
Cool.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Um, just bring it back to the Red Sox. I think we'd mentioned that Craig Breslow, Ben and I have talked about the fact that he was pretty on the nose at the GM meetings. He said he wanted a middle of the order bat. As you mentioned, he probably wants a number two starter. Do you think what he said reflects a change in the attitude of the front office as a whole, or do you just think words are words? I know that's obviously hard to tell, but
Yeah.
he said several things. Do you think words are words, or do you really think the front office is going all in on what we need?
I believe him when he says it. I was kind of surprised when we were sitting there and he said that. It kind of
Yeah,
definitely stood out. It was as forthright as he's been in being in charge. That said, last winter he said they were going to go out and get a frontline starter, and they did.
it did.
So, I think he has been um pretty like definitive in doing what he doing what he says to an extent. I think in this context of laying out what they need, I think he's telling the truth. Like I think they are gonna be now, obviously there's two sides to this where he's gonna try to get as, top a starter as he can, but I think obviously there's always a limit to a financial, I don't think he's going to be giving, 500 million to any of the
Right.
guys out there this winter. And, I don't think he's going to be trading Roman Anthony for Scooble, right? So, I mean,
Mhm.
like, obviously, there's limits, but I do think that they're really trying, even that, I think it was the second day when we kind of followed up on that question. He basically was like, we're not going after a 3 or 4 starter again. That was, or like, as definitive as he's been in kind of laying out what he's looking for. He really kind of was like, we're going for someone at or like right below Crochet, and I thought that was pretty telling. So, yeah, I do think they recognize with this window of young prospects and just with Crochet in that deal locked up that like the time is now. They obviously have had leading up to this point years of 5 years or so of rebuilding sort of on the fly and in the post Mookie era.
Yeah.
I do think that this time frame was sort of circled on the map of like we're spending now and we're gonna like lean into it. And so I think when he says that, we should believe him.
Cool.
Yeah, it's funny as because I remember like the trade deadline this year where he was very adamant. We're buying, and then trade deadline happens, and I mean we didn't really.
Yep.
I
Yep.
keep saying we,
We
which
bought,
Yeah.
um, but it's also funny I think because I'm currently studying to get my master's in PR, and every time he's said something, there's like now that part of my brain that's developing is like Okay, be careful there. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah.
hang on.
Don't give too many promises. Yeah, sure. No, it's
Uh,
true.
Bennett, can I
yeah,
jump in real quick? Can
yeah,
I
sure.
can I add one caveat to that question that just popped in my mind? When he says a middle of the order bat, obviously I'm sure we'll get into the Alex Bregman stuff momentarily, but do you think he's saying if we bring back Bregman, an additional middle of the order bat, or to him is he saying bringing back Alex Bregman satisfies that itch of like, okay, cool, we got a middle, like he's back, that's good enough.
I know that's the big question. I think that everyone is kind of like bandying about, are they going to add one or
Yeah,
two? Ideally, I think they'd love to add two,
I think it's got to be two.
but I wouldn't be surprised if it's just kind of one or the other. And maybe they add a big bat and then just slide Marcel Meyer over to third, like that kind of setup. They still kind of have to figure out what they're doing at second, if they use some of those internal pieces or try to, add somewhere else there. So I think there's a lot of it. Just I think it's very dependent. There's a lot of dominoes at play, like who signs where, when,
Mhm.
um, all that kind of on the table. I think again, ideally, they'd probably want two big bats. But I wouldn't, I would bet that it ends up being kind of one at this point.
Okay, cool.
Do you? Yeah, I think on the note of Bregman, I was really surprised. I mean, I was surprised by a lot of players who accepted the QO this week, but Glaber Torres specifically, I think to me that I read that as like the Dodgers are, I mean, not the Dodgers, the Tigers are now either going to have to spend a lot more than they used to or make certain moves, but that kind of blocks them from a path to signing Bregman. Um, do you agree with that? And do you think right now the Red Sox remain the most likely candidate for him to sign with?
I do. And obviously, I know he really liked it here and
Mhm.
likes kind of the trajectory of like the young core. Obviously, that only goes so far if he's not going to get the contract that he wants.
Mhm.
Um, but right now, I do see them kind of as the front runners. I know the Phillies are kind of recently been reported as being in the mix. So I mean, it is still kind of like the early stages. I think in the next couple weeks things will start to pick up. But this is right around the time last year where they flew out to LA to meet with Boris and Bregman and kind of had that huge sit down meeting where he presented like 16 pages of questions about the
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
It was right around now. It was like after GM meetings, before winter meetings, like right around Thanksgiving, I think. So, um, this stuff, I
Mhm.
think like all the groundwork is being laid right now. I'm sure they're meeting with a lot of top free agents just to kind of like figure out fits and kind of asking prices and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I think just given his good experience in Boston and their kind of reciprocal feelings about how he impacted the club, and obviously also Cora's close relationship
Mhm.
with him, there is an edge there. But again, it all comes down
Yeah.
to money, especially since he opted out and is trying to get a larger contract. So.
Yeah. To that end, do you think there's a number either both in years of the contract or in dollar amount that where the Red Sox will just kind of say, nope, sorry, we're out.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the projections I've seen have been like around that like 6 year 175 kind of projection. I can't imagine they'd go like much beyond like 200, and especially with that year, like those years,
Mhm.
he's 32, I believe.
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't um and has had some injuries that have kept
Yeah.
him out. So I mean, they factor all that in. So I mean, yeah, I don't think I feel like they might do a shorter deal with like a higher AAV. So like sort of similar what they just did this year. I don't know if
Mhm.
that's what he wants. Obviously, he's going to want as much security as possible. So I'm sure they'll try to get creative because this past deal was creative in the
Yeah.
way that they kind of structured some of like the deferral stuff. So um yeah, I think and just given they did this deal kind of a year ago. I'm curious to see how that impacts things too. Both sides kind of know where things stand and
Mhm.
know how they negotiated last year. So yeah, we'll see. But I do think that there is a slight edge for them. But
Mhm.
yeah, he's gonna go wherever whoever wants to pay him the most.
Yeah.
Cool. If obviously that does not happen, we have to make a pivot. Um, who do you think is high on the list that the Red Sox would potentially pivot to? There's obviously Pete Alonso playing first base. Do we look at Marcelo Meyer as an actual long-term option at third base? I thought he played the position very well, but if he's capable of playing a full big league season without getting injured, if his bat can play at the big league level, I think is up in the air. Who do you see as maybe the first line pivot if we do not bring in Bregman? And if the answer to the aforementioned question is we're bringing in one bat?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right now it's kind of the Schwarber Alonso kind of tug of war. It feels like those are the top two guys that they'll be targeting for obvious reasons. They need power, and those are the top two power bats on the market. Obviously, there's kind of pluses and minuses about both guys. You need more right-handed power, and Alonso brings that. His defense is not good. And if people were annoyed by Casas's defense,
Yeah.
yeah, Alonso's is that much worse. So I'm curious to see how that factors into things. Schwarber obviously played, here in Boston, but the one-dimensional kind of aspect of his like basically only DHing and the lefty bat. So yeah, there's kind of yeah, like in interesting like issues with there's no perfect fit obviously, and also a lot of teams need a power bat. So it's gonna be a competitive market for those guys, but I do think those are the top guys that they'll be after. Whether they get one or not, we'll see. Um and yeah, and kind of, go from there. And I suppose there's any number of options on kind of the trade market. You can kind of talk about anybody, and teams are always saying nobody's really off limits. So, I mean, that could go into another direction, and they could pour money into the free agency for a pitcher. Yeah, at this point, I feel like those are the top two free agent bats that they'd be pursuing. But I think we kind of have to see where things play out a little bit.
Yeah, and just
With
to just
Go
real
ahead.
quick, back. I saw this literally right before we jumped on here. There is a rumor that I believe was, don't know if it was started or just corroborated by Bob Nightingale, that potentially the Red Sox are in on a trade with Arizona, potentially for Ketel Marte,
Oh, I don't like
featuring.
that at all.
Well, I mean, it does fill potentially something we need, and what I read was that it featured David Sandlin and Wilyer Abreu. Do you actually see something like that happening? Is that something that's realistic in any way whatsoever?
Yeah.
Interesting. I
No.
don't know if that's real, but
Yeah, I know. That's the other thing is you kind of have to, I mean, yeah, take things with sort of a grain of salt. I also do think that while it might be real, like I think there's a billion different like scenarios. Teams just kind of like talk about stuff, and sometimes things slip out. So it might be just like, hey, what do you think of this? And they might have already said no, or you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. But I feel like at this point, um, if you're gonna, I'm sure they're gonna end up trading an outfielder because they have a surplus there and they have needs. So I don't know. I feel like I would expect a little bit more for Abreu, but maybe not. So yeah, it's an interesting one though.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much allergic to acquiring Ketel Marte. I
Yeah.
don't.
He does play a
Just
position that we do need, but
yeah, but the age, the contract, and then like the
yeah,
clubhouse issues. I'm like,
yeah,
didn't we just move Rafi because of the contract? Like the clubhouse issues. Like I don't know if that's
for
doesn't make
sure.
us look or us again. Like I don't know why I'm enveloping. I don't know. That makes the club kind of look like hypocrites to me.
Sure. Yeah.
Anyway, um, I I totally lost my train of thought there. Speaking of, we're just going to talk about trade rumors briefly. The Tariq Skubal rumor I find very confusing. Not just because it would the package to get him would probably be gigantic, but he's in his. I guess if the rumors are true, he's very far apart from Detroit on what a contract extension. He's in his last year before hitting free agency in a potential lockout year. I don't imagine the Red Sox would want to spend $400 million on him as an arm if it's when he hits the market or if he gets traded then extended. Is that rumor holding any water for you?
The one thing that I feel like is interesting with him is like, yeah, because he's going to be a free agent after next year, like obviously he's who he is and he commands like a big trade package, but if you don't think you're going to be able to sign him, like he's a
Mhm.
Boris guy and he's almost certainly going to be, wanting to get back out on the market regardless. So how much do you give up for him? It's kind of this like chicken
Yeah.
and egg thing. If you just go all in on 1 year and know that he's not coming back, do you just like raid your top prospect closet? Because that's what they'd be
Yeah.
asking for. It's a weird balance, because it's risky knowing that he probably wouldn't re-sign with a team or like is pretty convicted on trying to see what he can get on the open market. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's a hard one to sort of figure out because he's so valuable, but like, what do you do for that 1 year? So that yeah, I don't really, I have like a great read on that and kind of what would make the most sense for
Mhm.
most teams. I have noticed it's been interesting, and I think it's just because of the Cy Young stuff like lately, just of some of the clips that he's been like talking about Crochet and admiring Crochet and all this stuff. And it's been, and obviously like top competitors like that, they're always kind of, um, admiring one another
Mhm.
of kind of like, just people at the top of their games, just that wanting to get that much better and noticing like a pitch or a quality that like another guy has that they don't because they're just
Mhm.
these like freaks of
Yeah.
nature that can pretty much do anything they want. And then if so I have noticed some of the comments that he's made about just like respecting Crochet's game interesting. I don't necessarily think that means, he's gonna want to be here or, if he gets traded here, that would be, him signing here
Mhm.
long term, whatever. But I don't know, it's just something I've kind of tucked into the back of my mind. So yeah, I don't have a great answer on that. Like what would be realistic, what the Red Sox would even, like
Yeah.
put on the table and how confident they would feel in trying to re-sign and trying to sign him. Yeah, it's a tough one.
Hmm, interesting. Um, Pivoting to the outfield, as you mentioned, there's a huge logjam in the outfields. This is probably my biggest question mark with the team. Which outfielder not named Roman Anthony is still going to be here on opening day? And does that include Christian Campbell playing in the corner? Like, what are we looking at potentially for the outfield?
Yeah, I think like kind of the probably the big question that in my mind is it are you trading Duran or Abreu? It feels like it's going to be one or the other. And some people might want to trade Rafaela and sure, but he's also like the right-handed bat. The
Yeah.
defense is like off the charts, and I do think the trade value of the other two guys is probably a little bit more,
Mhm.
um, in some ways, depending on like what team you're looking at. But I think the Duran Abreu question is one we're going to be bouncing around. I mean, we also kind of looked at it last year too, but it does feel like it's
Mhm.
kind of coming to a head. And I know they keep saying there's ways we can make it work with all these guys, but again, like you mentioned, you've got Christian Campbell also in the mix, and you still have Yastinson Garcia that
Yeah.
obviously doesn't have a path either, so he might get traded too. Um, and yeah, it's not the worst problem to have, having too many good players, obviously, but it's gonna come down to what team, they line up best with, and that's kind of the boring answer. But I don't think right now we can say like, yes, it's gonna be Duran, because, they might find someone that prefers Abreu's, youth more. Um, yeah, I think that's going to be kind of one of the prevailing questions, throughout the winter until there's a resolution of kind of like what are they going to do with this and yeah, what makes the most sense for them.
Can I ask, do you think that one of them between Abreu and Duran carries a higher potential yield? Like, do you think there's one that they're more likely to shop? I know it's obviously super up in the air, but is there one in your mind that sticks out as like this is a very clear we can trade him for that number two starter. We can trade him for a middle of an order, middle of the order bat.
I mean, I guess, Abreu's got a lower salary and more years of control, so theoretically that should yield like a higher return. Durant's older and more expensive. Not to be crass, but like just the way it is. So at the same time, I mean, and not that Abreu's got the two gold gloves as well. So I mean, um, yeah, I mean, it feels like he could bring in a little bit more, but at the same time, like even though Duran had, a little bit of a down year, I guess you could call it compared to 24, like just what he can provide is so he's such a dynamic player, and yes, he's going to get older, and yes, the speed is probably going to decline a little bit, but um I mean, Trevor Story's, a little bit older than him by
Yeah.
what, 3 or 4 years, and he still gets speed. So I think we look at that as, oh, the speed's gonna, it's not gonna like drop off a cliff. Like he might, not be as quick, but he's still gonna be quick. He's still kind of got, yeah, that doubles power and even a little bit more power, and just the defense didn't look great this year, but I think he if a team needs a center fielder and he's obviously more comfortable in center, then I could see, I could see really both of them just being again, I think it really goes down to what team they're
Mhm.
the needs of the team on the other side, basically.
Cool.
Yeah. You mentioned Trevor Story there, and I know Breslow said that Story is the starting shortstop. Um, is that, I guess, do you think that there's a chance that he does transition to second base this season? I know that his defense kind of declined as we got further into the season, and it was his first full season in, I mean, years. So this might be an aberration, but um, is Trevor Story's future at second base, if not, next year, then maybe the year after?
I would think more the year after. I do think yeah, like I do think that even though in like late in the season he started to kind of tail off a little bit, there was sort of this just intangible comfort in the infield, and the starters would always talk about it of just kind of like having him back there, sort of like guiding everything. Um, and while Meyer, is probably the shortstop of the future, I do think like they'll keep Story at short for now, and I think also just having him kind of like um opt back in. I think there's sort of this kind of unwritten rule of, like, you wanted to stay here
Mhm.
and we're kind of gonna give you that position at least for this year. I can't really say, what the future holds, but um yeah, I think I could see him like staying there at least this year.
Mhm.
Okay.
Cool. Let's assume Alex Bregman is back. He comes back, and that is the middle of the order bat. Do you believe Alex Cora? I saw his quote when he said the team isn't giving up on Tristan Casas. And obviously, Alex Cora doesn't necessarily speak for the front office, but is there a world in which he is the starting first baseman and we're like totally reinvested in him? Because that's something that we've debated on our podcast quite a bit is what is, if there is any, the long-term future for Tristan Casas?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a time of year, and everyone in this business kind of does this, where you read a lot into things that are said, and kind of you spend the whole winter picking things apart, and then, spring comes and a guy takes off in spring and looks healthy, and then we kind of forget about that whole narrative that happened. So
Mhm.
I I think he was just like, I do think that they're trying to challenge him a little bit for sure. But I also think in saying what he said, and Cora obviously, yeah, like Breslow and Cora basically had the same line of like, he's not necessarily the starting first baseman. I think it was more of just sort of like protecting themselves of like the expectation of like he might have a setback. Like again, I was, just kind of going back again to the Cutter Crawford thing. Like we didn't know about that until spring training. So, um, things kind of crop up, and it was such a major injury, and he's such a huge guy that like the load bearing on that knee, like they got to make sure it's actually like in a good space. So I think if I think that comment or those comments were sort of like two-sided in a way that like they don't necessarily want to say he's the starting first baseman because like they're not 100% sure he's going to be like ready to go. And also they want to like push him a little bit, I think, just to, not get overly comfortable or confident that because he's still got stuff a lot to prove, you know. So I think it was a little bit of both, but I all that to say I don't think that it's like a foregone conclusion that he's like off the team or they're chopping him or
Sure.
like he's not going to be there. Like I think they're very much like planning around, having him there. And, if they have add Alonso, then sort of maybe some platoon type situation or like even switching them off both on at like DH to kind of rest Casas's knee, that kind of scenario. So, yeah, like I think he's very much like in the picture, but they're also just being careful with like the expectations on him, just again, because it was such a big injury.
It's interesting, like
Yeah.
hearing your take on that because I feel like I totally, obviously I'm not in the journalism world, but you must be just picking apart like cryptic comments and posts all the time because also he had that Casas had that strange post on Instagram.
Oh my God, yeah, I forgot
And
about
we were
that.
like trying to figure out for like days. We were messaging each other like, what is he talking? Like, what does this
Yeah.
mean? Is he leaving? Is he staying? So I
I'm all over though. So I feel like, yeah, like as much as I wanted to be like, what does this mean? I was like, this probably means nothing.
probably does
Yeah.
mean
But
nothing.
yeah,
We were really like putting our heads together on like, what
yeah.
is he talking about?
But
Anyway,
yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of the business. I feel like the longer I've done this, the more kind of like realistic I've tried to be, and also remind myself at the end of the off season how many things we talk about that like don't even end up mattering. And some of it
Yeah.
does, and that's kind of what your job is to sort of pick apart the things that might be real,
mhm,
or might have like credence. I think it's just kind of like the more you're around people that are, making big decisions with the team, you're able to kind of read between the lines of what they're saying and sort of pick up on how they're saying things or how they're answering questions and kind of like, yeah, comparing it to the past. And so I feel like those kinds of like nuances give you a little bit of insight and obviously then just sort of talking to people like around the team and agents and other people, across the league to kind of get more insight. But yeah, I think it's just it's the nature of the business and just sort of the off season that people just want to latch on to anything
Mhm.
to talk about because there's no games. So I think yeah, it's I feel like it's especially prevalent in baseball where there's no deadline for free agents to sign. So it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
you're always kind of trying to read between the lines of what people are saying.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean with Casas, I think also because he missed obviously a ton of time in 2024 as well. And I feel like I definitely said this on the show and or Harry, I just said it to you, like when watching Casas's at bats in 2025, just clearly there was something mentally going on there where he was just it looked like he was in his own head and that he was really overthinking things. And like I guess like as an overthinker, I'm like I call it where like I can see it, I recognize it. um I mean I personally wouldn't be shocked if he started the season in Worcester just to like pay no pressure, just like go play and get your head right. um with the I guess there are three players who I just have big question marks around in terms of I don't know what we do with these guys, but they're on the roster. What are your thoughts on Masataka Yoshida, Christian Campbell, and Romy Gonzalez? How do those guys fit into the picture in your mind?
Yeah, I think Yoshida and Campbell in particular are like kind of interesting cases. I do think Romy, they can kind of keep him as sort of one of the, even, as just kind of another sort of like super utility guy, or not even super utility, but just sort of like elevated bench guy. He did have a kind of a bigger role last year, but played well. So I do think that he'll continue to be in the mix. But Yoshida's tough because he really only DHs and isn't really a DH. I'm sure they would like to find a team that they could trade him to, and they'd obviously probably have to take on some of the salary. So, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not here next year, just given that, but also it's a matter of finding someone, that wants that that fits him.
Mhm.
Um, and then Campbell, yeah, is another tricky one because there's just yeah, no like the outfield like he's probably better suited for the outfield, but again, the outfield's so crowded. And he struggled in the infields, and they do have the kind of the opening at second base right now that's sort of undefined. So maybe they try to kind of like ramp that up and see if they can get him better at second base. I mean, that would be ideal. I try to remind myself that, like Rafaela went, and obviously he's still kind of, not super
Mhm.
consistent at the plate, but he definitely made strides this past year. Same thing with Duran. Like early on in Duran's career, he clearly, struggled mightily at the plate. So guys like go through this in the beginning of their career, and I think it was just kind of magnified with him because he had just signed the contract and he was the big top prospect, and he you know, um, flew through the minor league system and made all these strides and then had that great first month and then sort of just fell apart a little bit. So I think it's been a little bit magnified with him. I do think that there's like still a good future there and that he can figure this out and he's still a good hitter. Um, but it is a kind of a tricky situation. I do think they're going to give him like leeway, and they just given the fact they have in the past with other guys. But just like where he fits is a little bit more of a question.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean Yoshida obviously also gets complicated if the Kyle Schwarber thing pans
Right.
out, then like that's a huge um question mark. But that's a really good point about Campbell and comparing him to Duran in the early, because I always forget. Yeah, Duran kind of ate it for a minute.
Yeah.
Um, Rafaela is also interesting because his I'm kind of fine with his performance offensively because he's so good defensively, and I almost find it funny that when there are no runners on, he's like, I'm just gonna swing at whatever gets thrown, and
Yeah.
as soon as there's a runner in scoring position, he locks in, and it's fantastic. I that is just, I don't know, it's something about that is so baseball to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's true. Yeah, he likes the big moments. He likes to kind of have yeah, drive guys in and be like that guy. So I think they'd like him to to
Yeah,
kind of even it out, obviously, but I think they'll also just kind of take the big hits too. So
yeah.
So this is more of a, again, like you as a journalist question. And I've always been curious about this. And as a journalist, when do you begin to take rumors seriously? Like, is there a specific person or set of people in the industry? Like, if you hear Ken Rosenthal said something, or it must be true, or if Nightingale said something, it must be true or must not be true. Like, or how do you just command a certain level of how does a rumor command a certain level of respect? Like, oh, this could really happen versus the Ketel Marte thing, which is probably just like someone on Twitter just made something and it spun out of control.
yeah, I think the good thing, one of the things that I love about The Athletic is we have, writers kind of covering a majority of the teams and also Ken. So we
He's
can
like
just kind
the
of
goat.
bounce things off of Ken, literally. It's the best thing. He will loop us in when he's hearing things and then kind of will, message people and kind of we're very like collaborative, like newsroom. So yeah, like someone covering a team out west might be like, "Oh, I heard they're looking for this kind of guy. Like what are your, what fits on your team?" And those kind of we have lot of those kind of conversations, and then everybody will sort of spider web out and start contacting people on their teams or agents that they know. And kind of we do a lot of like double and triple byline stories because we're using all of our resources. So I think, but I think kind of like to your point, like, yeah, you kind of figure out where the rumor's coming from first. If it's like a reporter that you respect, and someone that has a track record of reporting correct information, then like you for sure are following up on it. But I also think at the same time, like there's a lot of stuff flying early in the off season that teams aren't really making decisions until that December closer to winter meetings time frame. That's when most stuff happens. So I feel like you start to take stuff more seriously in those um like in those weeks kind of leading up to winter meetings and obviously during winter meetings. and just kind of getting a feel too for like you're constantly having conversations with like team people and people with other teams, getting a sense of like how they answer some of the questions that you send them. Or if they don't answer things, then that's also telling too.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, it's kind of just your job to keep at it and keep kind of questioning things and throwing things out there. But you do kind of have to be, especially nowadays with just like random bots and AI accounts, you have to be kind of very discerning. And yeah, I don't think it ever hurts to just like, even if in a like a joking way, throw, even if something's not super, doesn't have a ton of, backing to it, send it to, a team person to see their thoughts, and they might start telling you, about something that is in the works, So I think it's just kind of it's keeping those open lines of communication and also just, yeah, collaborating with our newsroom of, using that like brain power that, across the sport that we cover to kind of like get the information out there.
Yeah, because God bless my dad, but the poor man has been
Oh
MLB
my
on
God.
he's been MLB on faxed so many times. Like he'll text me like, I can't believe Aaron Judge is getting traded to the Pirates. I'm like, Dad,
Yeah.
there, it's not.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
tough.
this is my final like as a journalist question, but I'm also very curious about this. How frequent is it that an agent or a team will essentially start a rumor to drive up the price of a player or to maybe move the trail away from someone that they're trying to acquire so that they can swoop in? Like, is that a frequent thing or is that just sort of a rumor that doesn't really happen that often?
No, I mean it happens, yeah, and I think that's where you kind of have to. The other thing is you can't just like report a story based off of what one person says. I think
Mhm.
you're always when you hear something, you're always sending it to a few different people to make sure that it's like not just again, because that does happen. Yeah, like that's part of their jobs is to kind of, fan the flames of whatever the player that is their client because they're trying to get the biggest deal. So if they try to make it seem like a bunch of teams are interested, then the team that is interested is going to pay more, right? It's just kind of how the business works. So yeah, I think when you do hear that kind of stuff, you're just not reporting it right away. You're checking to make sure it's true, or getting kind of two sides of both, just both sides, just to make
Right.
sure you're kind of covering all your bases and not throwing something out there that's kind of a biased, that you should know has some bias to it at least anyway.
Wow,
Y-
crazy.
Yeah, I always feel like if I see a rumor coming from two different sources, like that aren't connected to each other, aren't citing each other, I'm like, then that's where I'm like, okay, this might be
Do it.
something. Um, Jen, just I guess, well, I guess one normal question, then one final fun question. Um, what is on a scale of 1 to 10, one being zero chance, 10 being almost certainly, how likely do you think it is that the Red Sox will make one of their major moves at the winter meetings next month?
I would say pretty high. I feel like um, I mean, that's obviously where they got Crochet done last year. It seems like that's kind of like how Breslow likes to operate, do all the work up to that point and then kind of get it done. Um, I'd say, I don't know, anywhere from a 7 to a 9. Like, I don't want to say it's a
Mhm.
certainty, a 10, but it does feel like that's just a place where everyone's at. And so you have obviously all your conversations leading up to that point. But I think the in-person stuff is really helpful for a lot of teams.
Yeah, cool. And then my last question, which is, like I said, a fun one. Harry, I actually don't know if you agree with me 100%. I personally, the Fenway Greens, the New City Connects, are my favorite Red Sox
Yes.
jersey.
Yes, I agree.
I don't know why. I just love them. They're fantastic. Um, do you have a favorite jersey of the ones that the Sox wear? And B, I guess, would they make any changes for next season, or are they going to stick with the same 4-4 that they've had?
As far as I know, they're sticking with the same four. I know they've kind of, yeah, made a lot of changes in recent years, so I think they kind of want to like slow it down a little bit. Um, but I don't want to say that definitively because I don't know that for a fact. I'm that's where I'm the feeling I'm getting. As far as my favorite, I still kind of the home whites. I don't know. There's just something about that I've always just gravitated to. But the green I liked way more than I thought I was going to. I remember when they put that out to us before it kind of became public. We kind of had like a short window of to kind of like write and report on it. And I was like, oh, this looks I think I'm trying to remember how it worked, but I think we had like I had a call with one of the people that like
Mm.
was behind it. And I was like I was like, people are gonna hate this. And then I saw them and I was like, actually, I kind of like
Yeah.
these, but I'm curious what people are gonna think. And I don't know, yeah, they look good. The color is very like on point. So I don't mind them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I like them a little bit more, yeah, than the yellow. I know the yellow is kind
Like
of
the yellow.
controversial for people,
You
but
Yeah.
yellow.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even like, I don't know. I think even those like I don't love those, but I also like don't mind them just because of the like the marathon connection.
Yeah, that's why I like them.
How
Yeah.
like big that is here. I think it's kind of a cool tie-in. I don't want them to like I don't like them wearing it like super often, but I think the way they do it with like the Friday, Saturday or whatever it is,
Mhm.
I think that works and it's interesting and kind of yeah, it just makes a like old school traditional team like have a little bit of, something modern and I think they're always trying to bring in younger fans and I think like most of the time when you see those uniforms it's on like a younger fan. So I mean I think
Mhm.
it's kind of doing what it's supposed to do. But yes, I think I do like the greens like more than I thought I would. I think they did a good job with them.
I also miss the Navy aways. I know a
Oh,
lot of Sox fans I talk to like don't like them, and I'm shocked
oh,
by
they're
that because I think
great.
they're great. Anyway, uh, Jen McCaffrey, thank you so much for being on Not from Boston. Of course, we always appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you very much.